The Hellenic Polytheists We Are, where every week I interview a different Hellenic polytheist and lets them tell their side of the story. And today I have with me Rose. How are you today, Rose?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. That's good. It looks like it's a nice day over there where you're at.
It is, yeah, lots of sun. The
Good.
uh, the picture is my shrine to Persephone and Demeter. Demeter to the left, Persephone to the right, and then we have Dionysus over there.
And you were telling me that you painted those yourself, right?
Yeah, I like to order the statues online and then paint them by hand because it's just. I know there's this misconception that classical statues were just completely white, but having that pop of color really brings them to life. And not only does it feel more historical, it also just feels more personal too.
It does. It adds your own personal touch to it. It's interesting. We'll get to that in a minute, I guess. We can because I have 100 questions about that, but I'd love to talk about that. So I guess Rose, before we get there, we can ask you the first question that I ask everyone, and that is, what does Hellenic polytheism mean to you?
Well, on a technical level, in terms of just basic definitions, I tend to define it as anything that sort of falls under the umbrella of the modern day worship of the ancient Greek gods, because, of course, the Greeks didn't have a word for religion in the way that we do. So I sort of see it as kind of an umbrella, but I feel like if there's a pagan spectrum of like deity work or whatever people call it, then like witches who sort of casually honor deities in a secular context are sort of on one side of the spectrum, and the more devotional polytheists are on another. I do personally consider it a religion and a religious identity. I was raised religious, Catholic, and so I see it as worship. I see them as my gods. I see it as my faith path. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm more on the traditional side.
awesome. So you consider yourself more of a traditional Hellenic polytheist then?
That's a good question. I'm very much a revivalist. My methodology is that as opposed to just strictly reconstructing everything that the ancient Greeks did and trying to force it into modern times, we need to actually learn about the traditions from an academic standpoint, try them out, research as much as we can, and then adapt them. So I don't know. I feel like there should be sort of an in between point between being totally eclectic and being hardcore recon. Like, if you don't understand what you're doing, if you don't understand the foundations of the spiritual path that you're walking, it just I feel like there's less depth there, but then we also don't want to treat historical sources the way that fundamentalist Christians treat the Bible. Like, we don't want to get frozen in time. So what I like to do is I read primary sources. I look at the types of practices that the ancient Greeks tried out. Um, I try to do a few of them myself, and then I just sort of see where the gods lead me. And sometimes it's super traditional, and sometimes it's not.
For sure. Yeah, I think that if had it not been stunned, I guess you could say that it would have evolved through time and it would have been more modern than I guess reconstructionists that are sticking to their old ways. It would have adapted to our times, like kind of like what you're saying. So I agree for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the same thing goes with our personal understandings of the gods. I think that the gods do reveal themselves to us in different ways than they might have revealed themselves to the ancient Greeks, because religion varies by culture, and the ways that we understand them best and connect with them best are going to look different. And yet, at the same time, that being said, I think we can have deeper and richer relationships with them when we actually take the time to understand them as the ancient Greeks did and to think about how they originally revealed themselves to people. So it's sort of I think it's a matter of having a healthy balance.
For sure. Yeah, definitely got to remember the culture that they came from, and so the history behind the way they used to worship. For sure. For sure. So the second question is, how long have you been pagan?
I've been pagan for, so I have the official date saved. It was February 1st, 2020. I was 12 years old. It was the week before my 13th birthday. And I was just absolutely obsessed with Persephone, the moment I found out this was a real religion, I was like, I have to do this. I have to do anything I can to walk this path. My parents did not want me to be pagan whatsoever. Gradually opened their minds to it over the years, but it took a little while. And so, since I couldn't really officially practice my paganism in the way that I wanted to and declare it to the world, I just sort of had a private dedication ceremony out in the woods.
Wow.
But before my 2020 date, I think I really started looking into paganism, I think the summer before seventh grade when I was 12 or so. So I would say it's been 3.5, 4 years. I'm coming up on the official 4 year anniversary date next year in 2024. But my Hellenic Polytheist path has actually followed me from being a preteen to being an older teenager to becoming a young woman. And the experience of actively having chosen to be pagan when I was just a child, like the experience of having chosen to worship these gods as a kid and to have grown up with them has been really special.
So, how did you discover Hellenic paganism?
Gosh. Well, I was the Greek mythology kid growing up, particularly Rick Riordan. And now I don't think that his books are a good representation of the gods as we know them religiously speaking, but oh my gosh, they are phenomenal children's literature. He knows how to tell a story that kids will love. So
Mm.
I would read Rick Riordan and hear these stories about like these fictional kids worshiping Greek gods, and then I would read Dolores Greek myths, Doris Gates, all sorts of other wonderful authors, as well as I think I tackled like the Iliad and the Odyssey when I was a preteen as well. And I just fell head over heels in love with the gods, with the traditions, with the culture. Growing up Catholic, I really did not see a lot of relatable role models as a woman and as a queer woman. And so to see all of these different goddesses in particular who reflected my life experiences, that was really, really special to me. I was never really able to relate to the Virgin Mary. And so discovering Artemis and Persephone and Demeter and Aphrodite was just an absolute revelation. I think I've honestly worshipped the gods my whole life because I remember being as young as 10 years old and pouring a libation of juice for them or oh my gosh. After finishing Percy Jackson, me and my childhood friend tried to dig a hole in her backyard and bury an offering to Hades. I don't even know why. Doing it my whole life. So by the time I was 12, I was openly lesbian at a small Catholic school. And I was really tired of being treated like a second class citizen because of my gender, my sexuality, of feeling like I was less than other Catholics because of who I am. So when I found out online, I think it was on like just Safari or something like that. When I found out online that there is actually a modern religion that worships the Greek gods, I was like, I have to do this. I just can't imagine being any other way.
Awesome. Love it. So Persephone, Demeter, would you say those are your main goddesses? Who are your main focus when it comes to deities?
Well, Persephone was what brought me to paganism in the first place. It's a long, long story, but when I was 12 years old and pretty depressed because of the loneliness of being queer at a small Catholic school, I started to get into the musical Hadestown.
Mm.
And I'm gonna be honest, I never really took Persephone very seriously as a goddess when I was a kid. Everyone just sort of cast her aside as like this spring maiden with no backbone, like, oh, she's Hades' wife, she's Demeter's daughter, this or that. I was like, well, what's the big deal about Persephone? And then that artistic depiction of Persephone in Hades Town, just the raw vocal power of the actress who plays her, the power of the music, the power of the character. I think it was the first time that I actually felt the presence of Persephone, and I was like, wow, I'm dealing with a goddess. I had begged my parents for months to be able to see Hades Town live, and I got to see it. I had been looking forward to it for a long, long time. And throughout the musical, I was just utterly enraptured by the performance of this goddess. But when it was over, I was kind of faced with this creeping existential dread and this pain because I had realized partway through the performance that this was not actually Persephone, this was just a representation of her. And I got this chill down my spine, and I was like, I don't want to watch Persephone on stage. I don't want to read about Persephone. I want to know Persephone personally. And I was, I was scared shitless. I mean, I grew up
Right.
Catholic. Polytheism is not allowed, at least our brand of polytheism. I would say the Catholics are pretty polytheistic with their saints and all of that. But
Right.
I was so afraid. I was like, why do I want to worship this goddess? What does this have to do with me? But from that moment on, after watching Hadestown, I was obsessed with actually finding Persephone in her original religious ancient Greek form. So I read Homeric hymns in a meter. I got into a lot of fights with my parents. I would go out to the backyard and pour offerings to her. I actually went to school wearing a pentacle. I was Wiccan at the time. I went to
Mm.
school wearing a pentacle, and I said, I'm pagan and I worship Persephone. And it did not go over well.
Yeah, I bet.
But yeah, it was all really just a long process. It happened over time. My gradual journey from Wicca to Hellenic polytheism. I would say it took about 6 months of being pagan before I transitioned away from Wicca and into Hellenic polytheism because I found out about Wicca first. But I mean, being a pagan minor was also a tough experience. My parents are actually in a place now where they um, listen to and respect my beliefs enough to let me practice that under their household.
Mm.
Um, I have altars and shrines all over my room. I'm very involved in my local pagan community, which meets at a Unitarian Universalist church. So my parents are supportive, but it took them a long time. It took a lot of soul searching, and I kind of had to learn how to compellingly argue for these beliefs and how to educate people, and that was pretty hard.
For sure. Yeah, that reminds me, you telling that story reminds me of the way I came out to my mom, that who's probably watching this. She watches she's not watching religious family as well, and came out accidentally to my mom. And then I just didn't argue with about it. I just told her, like you said, just calmly of what it is. And it's not the cliche stereotype satanic thing that you may think it is, but it's this. And it took a long time, but she got to where she's watching this right now, like I said. So we made some progress. So your story reminds me of telling mom and how she found out for sure. And I think that's great that your parents are that open to let you practice in their home for sure.
Yeah, I'm very, very fortunate, relatively speaking, to have a loving family. I think the funniest part is that coming out as pagan was harder than coming out as gay.
Mm. Oh yeah.
Because when I say, "Oh, I'm a lesbian," people know what a lesbian is. When I say, "I'm a Hellenic polytheist," people are like, "You're a hello, what?" And I'm like, "Oh
You're
God,
right.
here we go." I think being part of a minority religion, especially one this small, is just sort of a lifelong process of having to sort of not necessarily to exist on the margins, but definitely of having to think about who you tell and how you tell it and how to explain yourself in a way that doesn't scare people off. And it took me a while to argue for it convincingly. I definitely went through an angry anti Christian phase when I first figured out that I was pagan, where I was just in a lot of pain over the homophobia of the Catholic Church and the sexism. I was upset about the fact that the regional worship of various pagan gods had been wiped out. So I definitely went through a period where I couldn't explain anything. I was just a ball of pure rage. But
Right.
I did some growing. I'm a lot older now than I was when I first started walking this path. And I'm now actually at a point where I can be open about my identity in school and where I actually have classmates who respect me. I don't make a point to bring it up when it's not relevant, but whenever it's relevant, I speak about it. And for most people, I'm the first polytheist that they meet, and I'm very determined to show them a good example of what we look like and to have them think, okay, well, if Rose is a polytheist, then maybe polytheists aren't so bad after all.
It's a good example, especially when you're out to your friends. coworkers, schoolmates, whoever, to be the example that you're not evil, but you are actually still a good person, and that it's a good thing, your spiritual path, just as valid as anyone else's for sure.
Mhm.
So, no, no, you go ahead. You're fine.
I think the wonderful thing is that when I've been open about my own beliefs, I kind of serve as a magnet for other teenagers who are interested in this type of thing. Because there's a lot of interest in the Greek gods among my generation of queer youth.
Mm,
I think part of it is Rick Riordan, but also an even bigger part of it connecting to that is just that there are not a lot of queer stories within Christianity, and there are a lot more of them within Greek mythology. And representation matters. I've just met so many teenagers over the years who are really curious about working with or worshiping the Greek gods, and they don't really know where to go. And so when I'm public about what I believe, they just sort of come to me, and it's a really wonderful feeling. On that note, I've given a presentation at various Unitarian Universalist churches, I think 3 times, called "A Rainbow of Gods," on the sort of LGBT and Hellenic Polytheist connection, and having a chance to present those ideas to the world and to actually connect with people like that has been really rewarding.
that's awesome. That's awesome. 100%. So, yeah, that's great. So you present at Universalist Church quite often, or is that a would you say it's quite often?
Very often, yeah. I've been very fortunate to have been raised in at my local CUPS group.
Hmm.
If anyone hasn't heard of CUPS, CUPS stands for Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. Bit of a mouthful. So UU churches are non-denominational religious organizations, and many of them have pagan chapters, groups that meet in person inside of them. I am personally very privileged to live near one of the largest CUPS chapters in the country because there are a lot of them all over the place. Mine is a very robust one. And my CUPS group puts on sort of general pagan events like the Wheel of the Year, Beltane, Mabon, Samhain, all of that, as well as full moon labyrinth walks. Trying to think what else. Classes, workshops. I'm actually going to be a presenter at my local Pagan Pride Day this
Awesome.
September, which I'm super excited for. But the thing I really love about my CUPS group is that we don't follow a particular pagan path. We're just open to all of them, which means that anyone, basically anyone approved by the board, can go on and present a class. So we have Norse polytheists presenting classes on their gods. We have atheo-pagans. We have crystal witches, and we have me, a Hellenic polytheist. And I've been fortunate enough to have been mentored by adults and to have been able to actually present events in an in-person church setting, and that's just been wonderful.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the full moon labyrinths. I've been a part of one of those before, and those are very special and very, very neat. Um, so the full moon labyrinth that you were a part of? Did you guys light candle? Do you light candles to make your labyrinth? How did you guys create that for you?
Yeah, so we have an outdoor one and an indoor one, but the outdoor one is better.
For sure.
Electric tea lights, and we have a fire pit in the middle. And there's, I would say, about an hour of sort of silent meditation and walking, and then we have drumming, dancing. It's really wonderful. I'm not gonna personally disclose my the geographic location of my cups chapter, but I would encourage anyone seeking um, physical, like in-person pagan community that meets and does regular rituals to look up which cups groups are in their region, because I think it's a wonderful way to uh, get involved in paganism through a more institutional path, especially for minors. Because like as a preteen, I couldn't just start going to some sort of like witches group that meets out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't just go to a pagan ritual in someone's basement. The fact
Right.
that meets through a Unitarian Universalist church really was one of the big selling points for my parents because it helped them see it as official. And that's not to say that less institutional forms of religion are less valid. It's just more that when you're a teenager, having a church that sorry, not having a church, having a pagan group that falls under some sort of trustworthy, family friendly organization, that can be a really big selling point in terms of convincing your parents to let you join this religion they've never even heard of.
Sure. Yeah, because way I joined covens is I met someone online. Creepy it sounds. I meet people online. They give me their address to their house, and you go to their home. So yeah, going to a church setting, a religious setting, is definitely making the parents feel safer than their son, daughter going to just a stranger's house that they met online. That just sounds creepy. So for sure, I love it. I love it.
Mhm. Although at this point, I actually do have an incredible priestess who's been mentoring me for a little while now, and I go to her house and we do one-on-one rituals together. My lifelong goal and dream is to actually become an ordained minister
Mm,
with a pagan focus. She's a priestess of Demeter, and so being able to study under someone who's been doing this work for a long time is just really incredible. I think that's if I could give any advice to young people, it would be if it's at all possible, connect with pagans in person. For many of us, it won't be, but if you can do it, connect with people in person, whether it's friends at your school who happen to be pagan, local pagan groups, local pagan scenes like Pagan Pride Day, and then find mentors really of any age who have experience and who can actually talk about these things with you in person because there is so much misconceptions online and just so much bullshit that you have to wade through when you're looking into worshiping the Greek gods. Social media in general is not a very reliable resource for learning about this religion, I would say. And I do feel like that's where my generation tends to gravitate towards. And I don't say that to invalidate the young people who really only have access to social media because they're in the broom closet. I think my main message is just to sort of be careful about which sources you use and then to actively seek out sort of experienced, trustworthy pagans.
for sure, 100%. And definitely, if you have the opportunity, for sure, to meet in person, you do learn a lot compared to just trying to learn everything by yourself solo. There is a difference. So I definitely encourage that as well. And Pagan Pride Day is also a fun thing to go to as well. If nothing else, if you don't want to join up with anybody, just to mingle with fellow pagans, doing something like that. Maybe sometimes I know that pagan shops, local pagan stores, will have meetups as well. So definitely check those out. But it's fun just to interact and talk to someone that doesn't think you're crazy, basically.
Yes. Oh my gosh. No, I'm very excited for my group's Pagan Pride Day this year. I'm going to be presenting a class on sexual assault and Greek mythology
Mm,
and how we reconcile with that, how we form relationships with gods who have difficult myths. And then I'm also going to be leading a ritual to Dionysus, Eleutherios. It's focused on queer liberation. It's just like a big, big Dionysus ritual. It's gonna be fun.
awesome. And speaking of Dionysus, I guess I can't hold it off any longer. Aphrodite Child, my co host, knows I love altars, and I've been staring at your beautiful altar this whole time. So you said Dionysus is on your altar, and that is he on the far right, you say?
That is, yes.
All right. So what I'm looking at is the design on his. Yeah. So can you explain the designs that you chosen? I like it. It's interesting.
So I would say a lot of this was just sort of inspiration in the moment. I knew about the ivy leaf crown. Um, Part of it was being limited by paint colors. Persephone and Demeter both sort of have like amberish hair, if you can tell from the picture, mostly because I don't have other colors. But it kind of worked for the way that I ended up doing them. I do like that decision. So I had done all of this, and I had, you know, I mean, Dionysus is in some depictions, a more gender bendy god. So
For
it felt
sure.
appropriate to have the eyes and those lips and everything else. But I really don't know where the suns come from. I'm not going to say that they're Minoan because we know very little about the Minoans, and I don't want to be ahistorical. But I just felt like I had seen them somewhere before. I don't even know where. And as I was painting him, I was just like, it just sort of came to me. I was like, he was kind of asking for me to do something. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do something. I'm just gonna see where this goes, and if it turns out terribly and I hate it, then I can start over, and if not, then you know, I have a new Dionysus statue.
Mm, I like it. It's definitely unique. I've never seen anyone like it before, so for sure, I love it.
Thank you.
And then you said there was Persephone and Demeter are the center of the altar.
That is Persephone right there, and I sort of
Hmm.
chose some matching colors. The crown is an amethyst ring that I put on there,
Wow.
and then a little circle of beads that I made for her a while back. And then that's Demeter. Um, I think I get a lot of my statues from this company called Beautiful Greek Statues that ships from Athens. I
Mm.
also have a wall of prayer cards. This is Persephone. I didn't make these, by the way. I got them on Etsy. I drew this one based off of one of her statues. And then that's Demeter from another online seller. Um, Funny story about these two vases. They actually are Greek. Um, I grew up with them. My abuelos are um, kind of amateur art collectors. They love antiques. They love collecting beautiful things. And I think they gave these to my parents as a, if not as a wedding present, then maybe when my parents were young, long, long time ago. Well, I grew up with these on the wall of my childhood home, and I would look at them a lot. And when we moved houses, my parents weren't doing anything with them. So I was like, please, please just have these to hang them on my wall. Like, look, you guys are not using them. I like Christmas a lot more than you do, and they're beautiful, and they're too beautiful to not be used. So that is Euterpe, I think, the muse of music, and then Poseidon up there. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm gonna be frank. Hellenic Polytheism saved my life. I was in a really dark place at the start of COVID, and I don't know if I would have been able to get through it if it weren't for this religion and if it weren't for having the support system. When I was quarantined with no friends to talk to, very little support systems other than my immediate family, having my cups group and having my devotional practice to Persephone and Demeter changed everything. I mean, Hellenic polytheism has helped me come to terms with my sexuality in every sense of the word. It's helped me gain confidence. It's been my moral center. It's just sort of been the guiding light of my life, and I really can't imagine who I would be without it. I think also just in the face of this world where everyone is going to go through some hardship. I mean, we all need to have something, and that doesn't have to be religion, but for me, this one is damn well worked out. And so many people have wondered in my extended family, in the Catholic setting that I grew up in, how I can find fulfillment in something like this. There's this assumption that you need to be Christian to have ethics or morality or some sort of moral center. And I'm like, how can anyone not find can't talk today. How can anyone not find fulfillment from this? It's just so incredibly full of wisdom and old stories and raw divine power. And I think anyone who actually takes the time to read the primary sources and to get to know the gods as the ancient Greeks knew them and then to make those relationships their own, anyone who studies this culture in depth, I really don't see how they could not fall in love with it.
So, where can we find you, Rose, if we are looking for you?
Well, I am not on any social media. That's an intentional decision. Although I do wish I could promote my stuff a little bit more. When I am sort of a full adult, I will probably be all over the place, so you have definitely not heard the last of me. I'm gonna be a mover and shaker in the pagan world if I have anything to say about it. But I do have a blog. I'm not sure how I would share that through this. It's called Of Pomegranate and Poppy, and it focuses primarily on the two goddesses, but also on my spiritual journey. A lot of my work is in person as opposed to online, so I can be a little bit difficult to pin down, but I imagine the world will be seeing a lot of me in a few years. So,
You do in the future. And the answer about your blog is that you can send that link to me and
wonderful.
out now.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I just love talking about this stuff, and I love meeting other Hellenic polytheists. So it's really been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to meet you too. Do you have any organizations that you want to throw out and mention before we close up today? I know you said cups. Is there? Do you know the website or anything that we can give to people?
Gosh. I think I'm gonna send the link to the General Cups directory after this, and you can put that um, in the description. For a while, me and my friends were starting a local pagan group that specifically honors the Mediterranean gods. You know, Hellenic, Roman, Kemetic, all of that. And we were doing rituals, and it was really looking like it was gonna become a big thing. But you know, it's difficult when you have small groups. You know, people find that they can't do it anymore and complications arise. So we are no longer a thing, but I'm still organizing local Hellenic events through my cups, and I still have a couple of fellow polytheists who are working with me. So I think I'm just going to share the link to my blog and the general cups directory, and then people can go from there.
For sure. Awesome. And we appreciate it, Rose, and we thank you. And I personally thank you for being here today. I very much enjoyed talking to you and meeting you uh, face to face, I guess we could say.
Yeah, I as well. Thank you.
Awesome. And I guess that's it. So we will see you guys next time on the Hellenic Polytheists We Are. Anyway, guys, see ya.
Thank
Bye.